I love that, like E.T., the roots of this project extend back to your childhood and the promise you made yourself to make a West Side Story movie someday. I mean, is this a project that's just remained in the back of your mind all these years? And was it just a matter of finding the right moment? I mean, were there earlier plinths where you tried to make it?
No, this was flagrantly on the front of my mind for a lot of years. I just never thought they'd give me the rights to make another movie out of this. So I never bothered the estates. And I came close to asking Stephen Sondheim because my company, DreamWorks, produced Sweeney Todd, and I met Steve for the first time at the Sweeney Todd premiere, and we kind of hit it off. But I didn't have the courage even then to say, you know, I've been thinking about, I'd love to tell my story. I'd love to be able to fulfill a childhood dream, which is to make my version of your great libretto or your lyrics and Lenny's music of West Side Story. Didn't have the courage then to do that. But this has been on my mind for a long time. If you ever saw my home videos of my kids growing up, you would see every couple of years them lip syncing to West Side Story from the original cast album. You would actually see my little kids, 7, 8 years old, running around the house playing Maria and Anita and Tony and Bernardo. And insane this film has been. These lyrics, these moments have been in my life for most of my life.
I love that. Are those going to be on the DVD extras?
You know something, if I got permission from all my kids, I would think that would be a nice additive.
I love that. I love that. Yes. The film marks your very first musical, which folks are very excited about. Now that you've done it, I mean, how would you compare the level of difficulty in orchestrating a song and dance movie versus, going to sea, going to war, going on all these other adventures you've taken on us over the years?
The difficulty level, I didn't even anticipate how difficult this was going to be because I had never made a full musical before. I did a musical number before, Temple of Doom, under the credits, as you know, the Busby Berkeley style number. I did a dance at the USO in 1941, which was more story than dance. But I've never done a musical before. So the learning curve was steep. And yet I am steeped in musicals. I've seen every Arthur Freed produced musical ever made. I'm a fan of Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly and Sid Charisse and Donald O'Connor and Ginger Rogers. I've seen them all. But that sing them is not making them. It's a whole different skill set. So I had to do a learning curve. And thank goodness I got a chance to spend 4.5 months in the rehearsal studio with all these great dancers and the great choreographer, Justin Peck, learning how to adapt my camera technique and pair that with his choreography. And I always heard stories that you really need a great choreographer to become your brother or your sister in that case, to be able to really pull off a musical. And I learned in the first couple of weeks how Justin's steps and my camera ideas had to synchronize. They had to be one, not two ideas, but they had to be one concept. And he became my brother on this film.
I mean, as such a lifelong fan of the music, which you've talked about, are you singing along on set, or are you just too laser focused to do that?
No, there's no time to sing along on set. They did all the singing. The kids did all the work. I had to just keep my eye on the dancing and the monitor and on what all of us were doing to achieve the images. We just had to capture the images. But it was an overall. Tony Kushner did an extraordinary job adapting the original Broadway musical into a vernacular that would be relevant to today's audiences, to be able to see a new West Side Story, not a new improved West Side Story. There's nothing wrong with the 1961 West Side Story, that their awakeness in those days. I mean, in those days, they were, having white actors playing Latino roles all the time. That was happening throughout the history of Hollywood. We needed to get it right. And the first thing Tony and I agreed to when we first met to discuss adapting the original Broadway show was we had to have a complete Latino Latinx cast for the Sharks. Everyone had to be Latinx descended, Certainly, our Maria is her grandparents are from Colombia. Everybody had to qualify that way. That was very important to us. We had to get it right.
Yeah, you answered my next question exactly. You know, Rita Moreno said this is a more socially aware West Side Story than we've seen, and that absolutely comes through. You've also said that West Side Story might actually be more relevant in 2021 than it was 60 years ago, given the sharp divisions of today. I mean, to expand on that, do you see the Jets versus the Sharks as sort of an allegory for the red versus blue politics of our time?
It's more than just an allegory. It is a representation of our times. The Sharks and the Jets were rival street gangs. It was based on Romeo and Juliet, but there was no race division in Romeo and Juliet. There was in the original Broadway show in 1957. But in 1957, the divide was the gang warfare that was occurring. And yet there was a great awareness, although it wasn't really expressed so much in the language of film, that there had been a ever widening division ever since the Civil War. We've never really gone through a complete reconstruction period. We really haven't. Reconstruction sort of, there was a glimmer of hope with the civil rights movement in the 1960s under Kennedy and then Johnson and Martin Luther King and everybody who followed. But we really found that there was a generation who's never seen West Side Story, never heard the music to West Side Story, probably never even heard that there was ever a play or a film called West Side Story. And we wanted our film to target that audience with the message that we think is as relevant today, even more so today than it was 64 years ago.
Absolutely. Now that you've checked musical off the list, are there any other genres you haven't tackled yet that you'd still like to?
I was asked that question over the last 40 years of my career, if not longer. Yeah. And I always said a musical is the one thing I haven't done. The thing I neglected to say, which I've never done, and the one genre that I haven't really tackled yet is the Western. So who knows? Maybe I'll be putting on Spurs someday. Who knows?
You are about to get 50 pitches for Westerns now.
Yeah, exactly. Believe I got a few in development right now, but who's to say which one's gonna spring to the forefront? I don't know.
You dedicated the film to your late father, Arnold. Can you talk about that Arnold for a moment? Was he a fan of the musical and excited to see you take this on?
He was a fan of the musical. He saw several stage productions, West Side Story. He saw the Robert Wise, Jerome Robbins movie and loved it in 1961. My dad was in LA, but on the set on the iPad on FaceTime, watching Justin Peck and myself directing the dancers and the actors. My dad was very involved, just watching on his iPad in Los Angeles as we made the movie in New York and New Jersey. And my dad kept saying, Steve, when am I going to see West Side Story? Steve, am I going to see it next week? And no, Dad, I'm not done with it yet. And I wasn't finished with it when he passed. And so he never got a chance to see our West Side Story. So I wanted to dedicate the entire film in his memory.
That touches my heart. Stephen, it is such a privilege anytime I get to speak with you. I really appreciate your time today.
It was great talking to you again, too. Thank you.